This Week in the Boardroom, brought to you by corporate board member and host NYSE Euronext, along with governance knowledge partners, the Center for Audit Quality, and Grant Thornton, and contributing partners, National Investor Relations Institute, and the Society of Corporate Secretaries and Governance Professionals.
Welcome to This Week in the Boardroom. I'm Scott Cutler, Executive Vice President with NYSE Euronext, and I'm joined by Ian Bremmer, who's CEO of the Eurasia Group. Ian, we're here in Davos. We've gathered together with a lot of the world's political, government leaders, business leaders. It seems a little bit more optimistic than it's been in years past. We've had a lot of observations from CEOs that concerns about the fiscal cliff being passed, still concerns about sovereign debt, Europe. What's your view, and how do you see things going forward?
Well, it is. You and I have been coming here together for a long time, and I mean, certainly for the last 4 years, post-financial crisis, that one manifestation or the other, that's all they've been talking about. And what's interesting is, you looking back on those 4 years, every one of those risks has been overplayed. They've been political risks, and whether it's about the American government being able to, sort of keep the banking sector afloat, in Davos in 1999, or is it going to be double dip recession? Can Japan deal with crushing debt? Can the Eurozone stay together, or Brexit? I mean, that's what everyone was talking about last year. This year, suddenly, what happened to all of those risks? Whether we're looking at the United States or Europe or Japan, actually, there's a little bit of optimism in each place, and that's actually quite surprising. Definitely more so than you feel in Washington right now, for example. The emerging market space is considerably more volatile, but there aren't nearly as many folks from the emerging markets here, so you don't get that sense. You do, 2,700 folks, a little hermetically sealed up here in the mountains. You do get a little more sense of a bubble this time around, because the big things that are potentially going boom aren't being decided by the people that are here on Magic Mountain. Last few years, it was being decided by those people.
So it's called the World Economic Forum, but there are certainly some regions of the world that aren't present in as big a population as they have in the past.
That's
China,
right.
particular.
China,
what's your view?
absolutely China number one. And first of all, they got 1.3 billion people, so they wouldn't miss a few coming over here. The fact is that there's no high-level Chinese here. Last year they didn't show up in large numbers. That was because it was Chinese New Year. They said this year they'll come. This year they moved it. Nobody's here. And I spoke to some members of the delegation, and they said, look, we don't want to join institutions anymore. We want to make the rules. And here at the World Economic Forum, it's about free markets, and it's about governance and transparency and accountability, and a lot of things that the United States and the advanced industrial economies have championed. But it's really not what China's system is about. So they'll do the Bao Forum, which is theirs. They'll do the Summer Davos, where they control the agenda, but they're really not here. And particularly in the side meetings, you see some of them, but in terms of the plenaries, they're really playing no part. And this is going to be the world's largest economy. So the World Economic Forum, it is economic, it is a forum, but this year it's very clearly not world.
So you make a business of advising executives about geopolitical risk, economic conditions around the world. We hear consistently from boards and CEOs that people feel optimistic about where they're at, balance sheets are strong, there's lots of opportunities around the world, and yet there's still a lot of companies that are just sitting back and waiting for risk to pass over. How do you advise companies to look at and manage risk in light of what you see, how the world is evolving?
Well, first recognize, as a political risk guy, you'd think I'd be saying political risk is everywhere. Actually, the downside in the developed world is bounded. It's relatively limited in terms of political risk. Before the election in the United States in November, so many people said they're going to keep $1 trillion on the sidelines as American corporations because they're concerned about uncertainty. Now Obama's come in. It's the worst possible outcome from their perspective, divided government, and there's not that much uncertainty. Not that much gets done. The United States moves very incrementally. Eurozone really wasn't going to fall apart. Growth is abysmal, but the political will to keep the place together is pretty strong. So in the developed world, I would actually say, most of your business plans should stay pretty intact. There'll be questions on tax policy, there's no question. But in terms of, are we going to see, sort of relatively consistent growth rates? Will technology continue to come out of the United States the way it has? Will there be lots of innovation, demographic trends, all that? The answer is yes. And in fact, one thing we're seeing here at Davos this year is an enormous focus on insourcing in the United States, the energy revolution you've seen talked about quite a bit by everybody. There's much more optimism on that. The danger in the U.S. is that the dysfunction in Washington, which is legion, is going to slow growth a little bit. U.S. recession. I think the real place where people need to be cautious about political risk are for those that are trying to really take advantage of the global upside. 3.5% global growth, most of that coming from emerging markets, of course, going to be 5.5% in 2013. A lot of folks are looking at their balance sheets and say, boy, we need to get into that, but we've never been in those countries before. Those are the people that really need to be careful about how do you operate in these places. You know, it's not transparent, there isn't rule of law, you can get nationalized. You know, your JV partner might be close to the brother of some prime minister, and before you know it, you don't have a company anymore. There are too many folks that don't understand that doing business in these parts of the world is a radically different proposition than it is doing business in the USA.
Yeah, so you know, looking at the landscape today, what do you identify as the top 3 risks that any company that's operating in a multinational environment should be considering?
Well, I mean, the biggest ones I would say right now, number 1 geopolitically would be China-Japan. China's rise is the single biggest thing that's happening in the world. That's a mixed blessing for many people around the world. For Japan, it's actually a negative. It's a negative economically, politically, and from a security perspective. If the number 3 and the number 2 economies, which have by far the worst relationship of any 2 countries in the entire G20, if it actually comes a cropper, the economic implications would be significant for Japanese companies, but also for those that do business in the places. A second point I would make, the Middle East is exploding. It's exploding in Syria, it's exploding in North Africa, the Iran issue is dangerous. Folks that have exposure directly in the Middle East, clearly this is a knock-on effect which is dangerous. Even France, which has just decided it's going to play a big role in the global war on terror, and it's going to go very badly for them. Holland may not maintain its popularity or be able to engage in economic reforms as a consequence. And then third point is, of course, the Eurozone itself. It's not going to explode, it's not going to fragment, but it's a very slow process, and the markets right now don't have much pressure on. You've got Italian elections coming up, you've got German elections. There's still a lot of things that can go bump until the Eurozone becomes more consolidated. For the next couple of years, that's still going to be a significant risk.
Yeah. Thank you, Ian, so much. You know, for those listeners out there, Ian's really been a resource for us and really hosts great dinners here at Davos. But I guess our observation is just simply that while we see all of these things happening around the world, it really is a much more optimistic feeling this year versus past years. And I guess that's my one big takeaway here.
Absolutely.
And for the directors that are tuning in and watching this show on a weekly basis, I think being able to operate in a risk environment and being able to calculate those risks but still make investment decisions is still key.
No question.
So thanks for tuning in this week from Switzerland, from Davos, and tune in next week where we bring you another program that's focused on how to make you a more effective director or board committee member. Thank you.
Join us again next week for This Week in the Boardroom, brought to you by Corporate Board Member and host NYSE Euronext, along with governance knowledge partners, the Center for Audit Quality and Grant Thornton, and contributing partners, National Investor Relations Institute and the Society of Corporate Secretaries and Governance Professionals.